The others among us have existed since the beginning, and have constructed a culture just beneath the surface of our own. Some of these people remain as potentials their entire life and never come into awareness of their vampiric nature. These types may still have access to subtle powers and may be drawn to occupations where they are the center of attention of a large crowd. There are different types of vampires, and each type is different regarding its balance of material and spirit. Some vampires lean towards spirit, while others lean towards the flesh. The vampire is a being whose astral body is disconnected to their physical, unlike humans whose astral bodies and physical bodies are tightly bound. Because of this schism, their energy centers, or chakras, are essentially broken, and the life force produced by these centers cannot sustain the vampire's flesh, and so the vampire is forced to feed from the life force of humans to compensate. Humans, unlike vampires, often produce well above their needs of life force, and can even survive being leached upon by vampires and other astral entities. Vampires use visualization techniques in order to feed from the life force of humans. From across the room, they can extend astral tendrils that latch on to the aura of energy surrounding their target and begin drawing that energy into their chakra points. The chakra located at the solar plexus is a favorite target. They may also absorb free-floating life force energy that humans have cast off. Places where large numbers of people gather in high emotions tend to be places where energy is produced and floats directionless. This undirected energy tends to collect on objects or people that comprise a focal point of the group. When feeding, vampires feel an increase of strength, senses, and an inner calm. The vampiric act itself does excite them, but afterwards, a balancing calm sweeps across their being. Emotions of fear and lust produce energies that most satisfy the vampire. The vampire does not, however, have to be in the target's visible proximity in order to feed from them. As stated earlier, every object or person you touch leaves behind invisible astral threads. These threads accumulate over time and are diminished a little by the passage of time. With constant and repeated contact, the threads between a human and a vampire can be such where the vampire need only envision their target and begin feeding. Remember, in the astral world, to imagine someone or something in detail is to access its location. The vampire may also use objects that have been in close and repeated contact with the victim to send thoughts and receive life force. Using close personal objects of the victim, the vampire may sense the location and emotional state of its owner, and may also send thoughts down the threads to the target. Each time a vampire feeds from someone, the astral threads that permanently bind the two accumulate. As the threads accumulate, it becomes easier for that vampire to flood the mind of his victim with thoughts and even steal life force from afar. Vampires tend to be extremely sensitive to energy and forces. Slight irregularities of energy in the living quarters of a vampire can be far more disagreeable than a human would find them. Techniques like feng shui can be used to create a more agreeable living environment for the vampire. Vampires are also sensitive to the phases of the moon. In days where the moon is large and waxing, their power is at its height. When the moon is only a sliver and wanes, their power is diminished. Nights where the moon has become a copper color are most advantageous for the vampire. The aura surrounding the vampire is different than the energy field that surrounds humans. For those sensitive enough to see the astral world, vampires tend to have auras of deep purple color, and may also have many gray tendrils extending from their body in every direction. These tendrils automatically begin to feed on those who surround the vampire, even without the conscious effort of the vampire. Direct physical contact, as opposed to astral contact across a room, is the best way for a vampire to breathe in deeply the victim's life force. Humans who have been deeply fed from may experience coldness, numbness, extreme weakness, and lowered heart rate and blood pressure. Those being fed from, especially those psychically sensitive, may have abrupt thoughts or catch a glimpse of the feeding vampire, or may see them in a dream. Vampires, like many spirits, can enter the dreams of humans and feed from the energy that is created by inducing fear or lust. After being fed from, humans may exhibit tiny red dots at the point of astral contact. Vampires tend to be more pale than humans, and also tend to be thinner. Despite the unusual pallor of their skin, they can mostly pass for human with maybe the exception of their eyes, which tend to be very intense indeed. Humans tend to find the presence of the vampire intimidating, as if surrounded by a shroud of mystery and danger. Their body temperature, hands and feet in particular, tends to be on the cold side, like those humans with poor peripheral circulation. Their senses are acute, and they are often more capable of seeing and hearing longer distances than most people, and are far more sensitive to tastes and odors. Their fine-boned physique tends to conceal a physical strength that lies within. As suggested in popular culture, the vampire tends to be extremely sensitive to intense light and heat, like that provided by the sun. They must take great care in preventing sunstroke and other sicknesses caused by the sun. An extremely hot day can be overwhelming for most people, but the vampire can find himself in danger, as opposed to the human who would simply be made uncomfortable by the sweltering heat. Headaches, nausea, dizziness, sunburns, and marked weakness can be experienced by even moderate exposure to sunlight. The psychological characteristics of the vampire are generally the same as humans, with perhaps the possible exception of an increase of pragmatism and detachment. We humans rarely know them as the warmest individuals among us. Coldness and disloyalty come easier for this flock. They are also extremely predatory. Whether this characteristic is on account of their lifestyle or whether it is truly inherent to their kind, I do not know, although I've come to suspect the latter. A male vampire is called an incubus, while a female vampire is called a succubus. Some vampires are closer to spirit, while others lean towards the flesh. Priests, as they are called, lean towards the spirit. As a result, they have increased vampiric senses and capabilities, but also suffer more of the weaknesses of vampires. Their ability to reach out at long distances and feed is unmatched. They are even more sensitive to sunlight and heat than the rest of their kind, and their touch is even colder. Unlike most vampires, who can use their own fleshly bodies to supply a great deal of the required life force, the priest must feed from others to sustain life. The priest class tend to be even more pale than the average vampire, and are more easily recognized for what they are. The priests are the most subject to the energies of the moon, and can even access an object's past by touching it. A vampire that becomes dangerously low on life force can be reduced to an invalid, and eventually die a fleshly death, although their spirit may persist. Vampires, like